Hey everyone, welcome to The Explainer. Today we're diving into a pretty massive question. What does it actually mean to experience life? We usually think of life simply as a timeline, just the chronological sequence of things that happen to us day in and day out. But today, using the framework of the legendary psychologist Carl Jung, we're going to look at life completely differently. Not as a flat timeline, but as a series of profound psychological layers operating quietly right there in the background.
So here's a thought experiment to get us started. When did your life actually begin? Most of us would instantly point to our date of birth, right? But I want you to consider something a bit different today. Did your life start the literal day you were born, or did it only truly begin the very first moment you became consciously aware that you were living it?
To figure that out, we're going to take a step-by-step journey into the human mind. Here's our roadmap. We'll start with living in the unconscious, then look at building your social mask, uncover the hidden shadow within, see what happens when the map fails, witness the birth of the observer, and finally, explore the universal patterns of life.
All right, let's jump right into step 1, living in the unconscious.
At this very first layer, our baseline experience of life starts with zero distance. And I mean absolutely zero separation between us and the events happening to us. Think about a little kid getting scolded by an adult. That child doesn't take a step back and think, I'm observing sadness right now. No way. They literally become the sadness. There's no gap there. It's kind of like standing in a rushing river but not even realizing you're wet. You're just being swept away by the current. Early life unfolds exactly like this, not as some conscious thought-out narrative, but just this unnamed, continuous stream of stuff happening. And because of that total lack of distance, Jung pointed out a really dangerous trap. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate. If we can't step back and observe, our automatic reactions just take the wheel. When we have no awareness, we literally have no capacity to choose. And without choice, those automatic knee-jerk reactions, well, they feel exactly like predetermined destiny, instead of us actually navigating our own lives.
Which brings us to layer 2, building your social mask.
As we grow up, we start progressively redefining life from what happens to you to how you appear to everyone else. And there's this fascinating biological feedback loop happening here. Every time you get a thumbs up, a smile, or a compliment, your brain's ventral striatum literally lights up with positive social feedback. It feels great. So quietly, through hundreds of these tiny micro-interactions, we build a persona. It's a protective identity, completely customized to fit perfectly into our specific social environment. Take this story of a super professional, highly composed female manager. Everyone around her trusted her clear logic and her steady tone. But one day, sitting all alone in an empty room after a meeting, it hit her. She wasn't actually sure if people trusted her, her messy, authentic internal self, or if they just trusted this flawless, polished external version she'd learned to project. As you can see, a really subtle gap starts to develop between who we are inside and how we appear to the world.
Now, Jung defined it like this. The persona is that which in reality one is not, but which oneself as well as others think one is. But here's the kicker. This isn't about being fake or malicious. As Jung points out, it is a completely necessary, totally natural function. We need it to survive complex social systems. So it's not about destroying your persona, it's just about recognizing that it's there.
Okay, layer 3, the hidden shadow within. This brings up a pretty uncomfortable question. What happens to all the parts of our personality that don't fit into that shiny, acceptable new persona? Well, those rejected traits don't just magically vanish into thin air. If you pride yourself on being a calm person, you have to ignore your anger. But it still accumulates in the background, in what Jung calls the shadow. And from the dark, it quietly and powerfully distorts how we perceive reality. Let's look at how this builds into something called projection. Think of the old biblical story of Cain and Abel. Cain's offering gets rejected, and this dark, unacknowledged emotion bubbles up inside him. But because he rejects that inner darkness, he refuses to own it. He projects it entirely onto his brother Abel. Projection is basically a funhouse mirror. When you refuse to recognize a flaw within yourself, you will absolutely see a distorted, magnified version of it in the people around you.
Recognizing this blind spot is incredibly powerful. As Jung said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. Catching this shifts our definition of life yet again. Suddenly, life isn't just about what happens to you or how you look to others. It's about how you are secretly interpreting reality. Taking ownership of your shadow is how you truly begin to see your life clearly.
Moving on to layer 4, when the map fails.
This is a massive, pivotal stage. It's the moment when the old systems we used to explain our reality finally collapse. Take a guy named Lucas, for example. He was in his 40s, highly logical, had a great job, totally stable life. But out of nowhere, he suffered a massive internal crisis. His external world hadn't shattered at all. Rather, his internal cognitive map was simply no longer detailed enough to navigate his experiences. He was looking at the exact same life, but his map was completely outdated and tangled. The familiar explanations he'd relied on his whole life were suddenly completely insufficient.
And Jung is pretty blunt about this. There is no coming to consciousness without pain. When your map fails, yeah, it hurts. But we absolutely have to reframe this painful misalignment. It's not a failure. You didn't take a wrong turn in life. It is a necessary cognitive crack. That discomfort is literally just the signal that your old operating system is giving way because your awareness is actively trying to expand.
Which naturally leads us to layer 5, the birth of the observer.
When that old map collapses, it leaves a gap, and inside that gap, a profound internal shift takes place. The psychiatrist Viktor Frankl, while surviving the unimaginable tragic horrors of a WW2 concentration camp, realized something astonishing. Even when literally all external control was stripped away, there was still a space, a tiny gap, between a stimulus and his response to it. Notice the neurological shift happening here, moving away from the automatic reactive limbic system, right into the conscious prefrontal cortex. This brief pause to just observe our own thoughts before reacting, that is what finally grants us the freedom to choose.
Jung summed it up perfectly. I am not what happened to me, I am what I choose to become. So the crucial takeaway is this. By simply pausing to say, wow, I'm experiencing anger right now, rather than blindly becoming the emotion, you gain distance from that unconscious flow. You are no longer fully identified with your circumstances. You have officially become the observer. And finally, we reach our deepest layer, layer 6, universal patterns of life.
This is where things get really wild. You realize your deeply personal inner life is fundamentally wired into all of humanity. Look at the story of Anna. She constantly found herself sacrificing everything in relationships, only to feel completely unseen. At first, she just thought she kept picking the wrong partners. But eventually, she realized she was living out an archetype, an original recurring script of human experience embedded in the collective unconscious. We aren't isolated in our struggles. We're just walking through ancient, shared forms of life that existed way before us.
If you look at this timeline, it's crazy how we all shared this exact structure. We generally move from an unconscious flow in our first 10 years right into a phase of social adaptation, building the mask, up through our 20s. Then, usually between 30 and 50, we hit that crisis where the map fails, which finally forces the birth of the conscious observer in our later years. Life, it turns out, is a remarkably shared psychological journey.
To put it into perspective, think of it like this. You are a localized wave on an ancient ocean. While your specific wave, your day-to-day personal experience of life, is entirely unique to you, you are deeply rooted in the exact same vast, ancient ocean as everyone else. Recognizing this larger context gives even our hardest struggles some really profound meaning.
Which leaves us with one final massive question. Are you finally ready to pause and see your life clearly? You've been floating down that fast-moving river for a long time, but now you know the layers. So I invite you, step onto the riverbank, embrace that distance, and truly witness your life maybe for the very first time. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer. Keep observing, and I'll see you next time.